I was driving back from a long court session in the city when I saw the mess from the distance. My truck slowed to a crawl, tires crunching over loose gravel as I stared in disbelief. The old wooden bridge, the same bridge that had been on my family's land for 3 generations, was gone, completely gone. All that remained were splintered planks scattered across the banks of the narrow river. Some half submerged, some already drifting downstream. I jumped out of the truck and ran forward, boots sliding in the dirt. The bridge wasn't just a pathway, it was a symbol. It was built by my grandfather, repaired by my father, and restored under my watch. Even more important, it was registered as a historical structure and marked protected under federal preservation laws. And now it was gone. A bright orange sign flapped in the wind nearby, the HOA's logo, Lakeside Ridge Association, plastered boldly with a smug note underneath unauthorized structure removed for community safety. LRA Compliance Division. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone. I took pictures from every angle, documented the damage, and tried to keep calm. They didn't just mess with a bridge. They messed with a federal judge, and they had no idea. But I wasn't going to reveal my card yet. I had a plan, one that would make them wish they never touched that bridge. As I stood there, the river rushing behind me, a familiar voice called from behind. "Hey, Judge, you all right?" It was Martin, my ranch hand and longtime friend. He'd seen it too. "Who did this?" he asked, glancing at the mess. "Looks like a tornado hit it." "The HOA," I said coldly. Martin's eyes widened. "The same HOA that told you last month they had no interest in your land." I nodded. "And now this. But they don't know who they're dealing with." I didn't mean that in a prideful way. I meant it literally. They thought I was just another rancher out here in the outskirts, someone with cattle and dirt under their fingernails, not someone who sat in a federal court in a black robe and had contacts in every corner of the justice system. But I wasn't going to pull rank yet. Not until it hurt. Earlier that week, I'd already sensed something was off. A few strangers had been walking the boundary of my land. Some in polos and khakis, clipboards in hand. I thought maybe they were surveyors, maybe developers. But I'd brushed it off. Now I knew better. Martin helped me gather the loose boards. We didn't talk much. The silence between us was heavy. The bridge was gone, and I couldn't even cross the creek to get to the other half of my property without it. Later that evening, I walked into the Lakeside Ridge HOA office. It was a polished building, far too shiny for a rural area like this, glass doors, stone veneer, and a fountain in the front that always seemed to be broken. Inside, the receptionist gave me a bored look. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to speak to whoever authorized the removal of the bridge on my ranch," I said. She blinked slowly. "And you are?" "Judge Carter," I replied. Still no reaction. She tapped something on her screen. "You're not listed as a member of the HOA, sir." "I know. I never joined, and my land isn't part of this subdivision. That bridge wasn't on HOA property." She looked confused now, but before she could say anything, a tall, balding man stepped out from the back office. His name tag read Ed Branson, HOA Vice President. "Is there a problem, sir?" Ed asked, stepping forward. I turned to him, cool as ever. "Yes, Ed. I'd like to know why your organization tore down a historic structure on federally registered private land." He gave a short laugh. "That rickety thing, it was a danger. We received complaints from homeowners about the appearance. Said it looked unsafe. Our compliance team took initiative." "Did you file a complaint with the county, with the state, with the Federal Preservation Office?" I asked. Ed shrugged. "Didn't think it was necessary. Thought we were doing the area a favor." "You weren't," I said flatly. "And you just made a massive legal mistake." He scoffed. "Look, if it's about some permit, I'm sure we can work it out. But frankly, judge or not, if you're in our community, I'm not." I cut him off. "My ranch sits outside your jurisdiction, always has, always will." The receptionist looked up, eyes wide now. She was beginning to understand, but Ed was too arrogant to notice. He smiled smugly and crossed his arms. "Well, maybe it's time your property became part of the community." I stared at him. So that was it. This wasn't about the bridge, it was about power expansion control. They wanted to absorb my land into their HOA to boost their profile and increase fees. He thought this was a game, but I had an entire playbook they'd never read. That night, I called my contact at the U.S. Department of the Interior. The bridge had been on the protected registry for over 20 years. There were records, inspections, reports, even a local article from the 90s about its heritage. They'd torn down a federally protected landmark without notice, without paperwork, and on land that didn't belong to them. That was a federal offense. The wheels were now in motion, but I still didn't show my hand to Ed or the HOA. The next day, I parked my truck at the edge of the property, right where the bridge used to stand. I started putting up caution tape and signs that read crime scene federal property. Martin came up behind me laughing under his breath. "You're serious about this?" "As a heart attack," I said. We spent the rest of the day setting up trail cams, motion detectors, and signs not to catch vandals but to build evidence because I knew Ed wasn't done. And I was right. 2 days later at around midnight I was reviewing case files in my home office when I got a notification on my phone. One of the trail cams had triggered. Someone was on my land. I opened the app and watched in real time as 3 men in dark clothes tiptoed across the creek bed, flashlights low. They were looking at the new signs. One of them kicked one over. Another started taking pictures. They were gathering proof to claim the land was public or abandoned. I dialed Martin. "Get over here, we've got trespassers." We rode out in my ATV with the lights off, coasting silently through the trees. The night was cold, the air sharp, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves under our tires. When we crept close, I spotted them. 2 of the men were scribbling notes. The third was placing flags along the ground. They were trying to map my land. I flipped on the ATV's headlights. They froze like deer. One of them dropped his clipboard and ran. The other 2 tried to act like they were just lost. I didn't say a word, just snapped photos. Then I said the one thing that made their faces go white. "You're trespassing on federally protected property." They stammered, fumbled with excuses, and then ran. Martin chuckled. "They picked the wrong ranch." The next morning I printed the photos, put them in a neat file, added timestamps, included the HOA memo from their bridge demolition. I was preparing a legal ambush that would hit them harder than they ever imagined. But just as I was sealing the envelope from my federal contacts, there was a loud boom from the back of my ranch. Something had exploded. Smoke started rising. Martin burst into my office, face pale. "They blew up your shed." I jumped to my feet and grabbed my boots. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a land dispute anymore. This was war. By the time I reached the back of the ranch, the flames were already dancing high into the night sky. The old wooden shed. Nothing fancy, just a place I kept spare tools, fencing wire, and feed, was completely engulfed. The smoke was thick and bitter, and the scent of burning chemicals hung in the air. Martin ran ahead of me with a fire extinguisher, but it was useless. The shed was gone. I grabbed the hose by the barn, but even as we sprayed water toward the blaze, we both knew it was too late. Someone had blown it up. Not knocked it over, not burned it down by accident. Blown it up. There were scorch marks in the dirt and a shattered metal gas can lying yards away. Whoever did this had used fuel, maybe fireworks, or even worse, and they wanted to send a message. But the only thing they'd managed to do was pour gasoline on a legal wildfire they couldn't control. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed up and reviewed all the camera footage from the day before, and there it was, clear as day. One of the same guys who'd trespassed on my property earlier that week was captured again, sneaking toward the shed after sundown. A few minutes later, a bright flash lit up the entire screen. The explosion. I backed it up, screen recorded everything, and emailed it to both my lawyer and a close friend at the U.S. Marshal's office. I knew better than to handle this alone, because now this was arson on federal property. That was no longer just an HOA issue, it was a criminal investigation. The next morning I filed a full report with the sheriff's department. The deputy, who came out, a young guy named Rob, looked like he wasn't sure what to make of the whole thing until I showed him my credentials. "You're a federal judge?" he asked. I nodded. That shed wasn't just sitting on my land, it was sitting on the same parcel listed in the National Historical Registry, and they tore down the bridge to get to it. Rob scratched his head and radioed his supervisor. By noon, my ranch was crawling with state police. The bomb squad came out to confirm what I already knew. It had been intentional. I didn't need to say a word to the press. The story was writing itself. Still, I hadn't heard a word from the HOA. Not a phone call, not a letter, nothing. It was the calm before the storm. A few days passed. The ashes of the shed were still fresh, but I was rebuilding. With cameras installed at every angle of the ranch, now I wasn't taking any chances. Martin had gone into town for supplies when I got a knock at the door. It was a man in a dark gray suit, clipboard in hand. "Good morning. You must be Mr. Carter," he said. I stepped onto the porch. "That's Judge Carter to you?" He smiled, not fazed. "I'm from the Lakeside Ridge Association. I was sent to formally introduce a zoning proposal." I crossed my arms. "You came to my private property to introduce what?" He flipped a page. "The HOA is expanding. As part of the new residential plan, we are seeking to include surrounding lands into the zoning district. This includes your ranch." I laughed loud, the kind of laugh that makes the other person shift uncomfortably. "You blew up my shed. You tore down a protected bridge. You trespassed at night, and now you're here asking me to join your little community." He kept his smile up, but his eyes twitched. "I assure you, we weren't involved in any—" I cut him off. "Save it. You can tell your boss that if one more footsteps on my land, I'll drag your entire board into federal court." His smile vanished. "We were hoping to avoid legal action." "Too late," I said and shut the door in his face. I watched through the window as he stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked back down the driveway. That same afternoon, Ed Branson, the smug vice president, finally reached out. I received an email formal and full of legal jargon, but I knew what it really was: a weak attempt to cover their tracks. It read, "Due to recent misunderstandings between our compliance division and local residents, we are offering a community-wide meeting to resolve any disputes in a civil and neighborly fashion." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to the U.S. Attorney's Office along with my case file. Let them dig into it now. But then came the unexpected move. 2 nights later, while reviewing court dockets on my laptop, my internet cut out. I figured it was a storm rolling in, but when I checked my phone's hotspot, it worked fine. Curious, I walked outside. That's when I saw it. A crew of workers all in yellow vests standing by the ranch's telephone pole. They were lowering what looked like a booster box into the back of a truck. I ran down the hill. "Hey, what are you doing?" One guy, clearly the lead, looked up. "Oh, we're here from Rigium, the HOA service provider, just pulling out equipment." I frowned. "That booster was installed by my provider, not Rigium." He blinked. "We were told this was part of the HOA's extended coverage zone." I showed him my parcel ID and the land boundary map on my phone. "This isn't HOA property and this equipment isn't yours. You're stealing it." He turned pale. Then I asked the one question that knocked the wind out of him. "Who gave you permission to enter?" He stammered. We got a call from the association office." I pulled out my phone and began filming. "You just admitted to removing private property based on an order from someone who didn't own it. That's theft." He tried to wave it off, said it was a misunderstanding, then climbed into the truck and left with his crew. But the damage had already been done. They were trying to push me off my land. Not just physically, but now digitally. They wanted control over every inch of the property waterland communication, and I wasn't about to let it happen. The next morning, I filed another complaint. This time, I attached the video, the witness statement, the HOA's false zoning proposal, the map of the property, the footage from the explosion, the photos of the trespassers. It was becoming a case study in HOA overreach. And yet the very next day, Martin returned from town with a letter. "Judge, you better look at this." I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded notice, big red stamp across the top, "Notice of property foreclosure intent." The HOA had filed a lien on my land. They claimed back dues, violation fines, and late penalties adding up to over $27,000. All of it was fake, all of it was fabricated, all of it was illegal. But what made my stomach twist was the last line. "If payment is not received within 30 days, HOA has right to initiate seizure of property as per community standards." They were trying to take my ranch, my family's home, the place my father built and my grandfather protected. That night, as the wind howled across the empty place where the bridge used to be, I sat on the porch boots up on the railing watching the stars and whispered under my breath, "You wanted a war? Fine." I stood up, walked inside, and opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. I pulled out the envelope I had been saving for a moment like this. Inside was a sealed order signed by me but ready to be executed by someone else. An order for a federal injunction. I picked up my phone and called the one man who could make it happen. "Marshall Wilkins." I said, "You still got that empty docket for property disputes?" "Yeah, why?" I smiled. "Because I just found the case of the year." Marshall Wilkins didn't hesitate. "Send everything you've got," he said. "I'll open the file first thing in the morning." I emailed the full report, every bit of it. The illegal bridge demolition, the arson, the trespassing, the attempted digital theft, and now the fabricated foreclosure notice. By the time the sun rose, my case was on the federal docket with an expedited order for injunction. It was official now. The HOA wasn't just being investigated for nuisance behavior. They were being investigated for a string of federal offenses. Still, I didn't go public. Let them keep digging their hole. Let them think they were winning. I wanted them blind when the hammer dropped. 3 days later, I got a call from a woman named Hannah Thomas, an investigator from the Department of Justice. "We've reviewed your file," she said, her voice firm but respectful. "I'll be personally taking the lead on this. Would you be available for a site inspection this week?" "I'll be here," I said. "And Judge," she added, "we've already opened a multi-agency task force on HOA overreach nationwide. Yours might just be the first case we bring to court." That same day, Martin and I walked the property together. The place felt different now, tense, like it was holding its breath. "What are they going to do when they find out who you are?" Martin asked, running his hand along the new trail cam post. "I'm hoping it's already too late for them to do anything," I replied. Then I paused. There was a car parked just down the dirt road outside my gate. Inside was a folded notice, big red stamp across the top, "Notice of property foreclosure intent." The HOA had filed a lien on my land. They claimed back dues, violation fines, and late penalties adding up to over $27,000. All of it was fake, all of it fabricated, and all of it illegal. But what made my stomach twist was the last line. If payment is not received within 30 days, HOA has right to initiate seizure of property as per community standards. They were trying to take my ranch, my family's home, the place my father built and my grandfather protected. That night, as the wind howled across the empty place where the bridge used to be, I sat on the porch boots up on the railing watching the stars and whispered under my breath, "You wanted a war, fine." I stood up, walked inside, and opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. I pulled out the envelope I had been saving for a moment like this. Inside was a sealed order signed by me but ready to be executed by someone else. An order for a federal injunction. I picked up my phone and called the one man who could make it happen. "Marshall Wilkins," I said. "You still got that empty docket for property disputes?" "Yeah." "Why?" I smiled. "Because I just found the case of the year." Marshall Wilkins didn't hesitate. "Send everything you've got," he said. "I'll open the file first thing in the morning." I emailed the full report, every bit of it. The illegal bridge demolition, the arson, the trespassing, the attempted digital theft, and now the fabricated foreclosure notice. By the time the sun rose, my case was on.